Hello, everybody. It is Saturday night at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. I am Chris Weuve, not speaking for his employer, and this is Starfleet Tactical. And Alec is here.
Hey there.
Talk about just-in-time arrivals, Alec.
just made it. Yeah, all of a sudden the Wi-Fi went out.
I was just about to explain to them about how I didn't know if you were going to make it. And as a result, maybe we were doing a question and answer show, or maybe we were going through the starships of Prelude to Axanar. I did not want to do that without you because I've already done that once without you. And I'm trying to do value added rather than just repeating a presentation I did a year ago. So how have you been?
Good. Just busy. It was another. I had to get a proposal done today, and an update for our benefactors. Just been very busy. The good news is we got our animal rescue just got its 501c3 yesterday. So
cool.
Yeah, so very happy about that. I was just looking for the unfortunately, I'm not on my computer. I wanted to get the comparison chart for the sizes of the ships and all, which I don't know if you have that pulled. If you have that,
I don't think I've seen that.
All right, hold on 1 second. Let me get my laptop.
All right, so while he's doing that, I'll go ahead and do all the admin stuff so that we're not waiting on that. So so Alec, I'm going to do admin while you're looking for that.
You do that. Where's my computer?
So my schedule is under constant modification. And so right now it's looking like basically all of February is a go, that I'll be able to do presentations or, do the show. And who knows about March, but all of this is up in the air because I've got some business travel, and it's unclear whether I'm going to be gone for 1 week or 2. And it's unclear when people are going to be visiting me in town, and this and that and the other thing. And it's just been a constant mess, and it seems to change on a weekly basis. So sorry about that. The second thing is, as always, the caveats apply. These are my opinions, not my employer's, and all the images that we're going to show tonight are the property of the originators, and we're trying to add educational value through criticism and commentary. Alec is actually the owner of a bunch of these images, so that shouldn't be a problem. Did you find what you were looking for, Alec?
Yeah, my computer was downstairs. So let me just I'm thinking let me drop them on the Google Drive.
Okay, while you're doing that, I'll continue. Okay, so we're going to talk about the starships of Prelude to Axanar. As I said in the intro to this, that I had did a presentation on this in episode 98. So this is basically, a lot of it is that presentation with some of the stuff at the front taken out. But this time I've got Alec along. It is important, though, to understand the context behind it. So I'm going to start with the context. I'm going to look at some non-Prelude Star Trek ships, and then we'll go through the Prelude ships and that others at the end. I forgot to delete that. We're not really going to do the others. But things to keep in mind, haven't rigorously researched any of the stuff involved. That's true for all of the Star Trek, all the ships I've shown you in the past, etc. My research has been, what I find cool. I can't say that I've done anything that looks like an academic study. But there are some questions to ask yourself as you're looking at ships. What was this ship originally designed for? What's its purpose? Does the ship have an intermix shaft? Because I think that's a really, really important detail, and Alec can tell us canonically whether the Prelude to Axanar ships have an intermix shaft or not. If so, how does the fuel get to the warp engines and the impulse engines and the torpedo tubes? How does it route around through the ship? If you are doing this sort of matter antimatter reactor, this long shaft, how does it get around in some of these designs? It's a little bit complicated. Do I have to run antimatter or actually more accurately plasma? Do I have to run warp plasma through the people tank? I really don't want to run warp plasma through the people tank. So I frequently say antimatter through the people tank, but a lot of times it's plasma. Sometimes it is antimatter if you're going to like the impulse engines, but because I think I remember, well, I could be wrong on that. In any event, you definitely don't want to run plasma through the people tank, so that's probably good enough. And I'm not real wild about running plasma through the hangar bay either. So let's talk a little bit about context. Here's the context. On the one hand, we've got Alec Peters, a successful creative artist, actor, and businessman who is focused on telling a good, entertaining story and doesn't let the geek stuff get in the way. He cares enough to have a professional headshot done, as you can see from this picture. And he has a girlfriend. So I, on the other hand, am a professional analyst, read geek. I'm focused on the geek stuff, and I don't let telling a good, entertaining story get in the way of being focused on the geek stuff. I'm way too lazy to have a professional headshot done. It's on the list of things to do, but it's been on the list of things to do for like 4 years now. And I do not have a girlfriend, but I do have an ex-wife. So our skills, goals, and approaches are very different when it comes to this stuff. And so I'm sure that I'm going to focus on stuff that Alec was not thinking about when these ships were designed. And also, I don't have a good feel for the question of, Alec, how much of this did you design, and how much of this did other people just bring to you?
Yeah, so we'll talk about that for a sec, because it's been an issue lately. As a matter of fact, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I can show about the Aries. Let me. I'm making a folder here to drop all this stuff in. And sorry, I should have done this previously.
It's been a busy day for everybody.
Been a busy week.
Yeah, I understand.
And so let me here. I'm going to just copy a whole bunch of this stuff in. Yeah, but one of the things that came up over the last couple of weeks is literally who designed the Aries, and that came up because Sean Tarngo, who worked with me on the ship early on, and who designed the Titan, has been saying that he designed the Aries, and that's not true. He kind of drew the Aries when I told him this is what I want, and I have there's a bunch of pictures I have of the Aries. Which I think, I'm just trying to think if this is, oh yeah, here we go. I had a bunch of images that originally that, and here's two of them right here. I'm gonna drop them in. And I've made no secret of the fact that the Aries was basically designed more or less after the Centaur. Meaning that was the basic design that I wanted. And there were a couple of examples. Okay, so now that we have it here, let me just open Google Drive on my main computer here. And that way I can download this. I was probably going to say, here we go. Oh, that was easy. All right, so let me close this out. Close out Firefox, and shall we start with? Let's start with. I really want to start with this image. There are a couple images here. Let me just to give everyone an idea about how we kind of got where we are with the okay. Let me share these on StreamYard.
Okay, I'm looking through to see if we've got any questions. There's a discussion about using adhesives in building models.
So here's a great chart. This is kind of like when we talk about not the Aries, but the rest of the fleet for Axanar. We, originally I came up with the Aries, and then it was like, well, what's the rest of the fleet? And being a disciple of Franz Joseph, if we will, it was like destroyer. There's going to be a destroyer. There's going to be one, one with that's more like a Reliant class, because I love when they retrofitted the Reliant, which is the Miranda class, to the TOS time frame rather than the movie time frame, right? So I love those designs. I was like, that's what we need to do. We need to have something, but we really need to have something that's before all the TOS designs that Franz Joseph did in the technical manual, right? And so lo and behold, what do we get? We get Star Trek 2009, and they came out with this, and I think this is like from the Art of Star Trek 2009. Okay. And they come up with these these style ships here. And I'm like, aha, yes, that's what we need to do. And so the rest of the fleet, not the Aries, but the rest of the fleet was basically designed. I basically said to Tobias Richter, I said, Tobias, this is what we're going to do. Let's take these designs and port them over, because sorry, we got a lot of cats in here now. I made especially our one feral cat, who now is my best friend, who's of course in the box.
Ferals do that. They find one human and they follow that human around the house.
Oh yeah. This is the mom that gave birth in the first weekend in May, and all her kittens are off at homes, and she was the feral one that wanted nothing to do with us and was hiding, and now she follows me everywhere and wants pets. But so I gave this to Tobias, and I said, Tobias, this is what we need to do. We're going to have 4 or 5 classes of ships, which was like, let's have a single nacelle, which in this case, they don't show the single nacelle ship, which I guess JJ didn't have a single nacelle ship. But I said, let's do a single nacelle ship. The Mayflower here is the double nacelle ship, right? If you look at, I'm sorry, not double, double nacelle, no secondary hull, right? That's the Mayflower. The Armstrong, now this is where JJ screwed up. The Armstrong has 3 nacelles. That makes no sense, right? So I was like, okay, the Armstrong class, we're going to have a class that's going to have a secondary hull, but it's going to be in this basic configuration. And then I said, and then we're going to have a carrier, which is basically what you see here is the USS Newton, which is our Geronimo class. So this is basically where we started. Okay. So having done that, we then moved to Tobias did this, which of course is brilliant. And this was basically, once we got going, he was like, okay, and here are the designs of the ships. And we went back and forth, and I'm not sure that this, it says final version, 15th of March 2014. We went back and forth on size. I mean, because on how big are each of the ships? How big, whatever.
Mhm.
But you see here, the Hermes here, single nacelle ship. The Geronimo, the Korolev is, and this is in no order. So it really class size show. Hermes is your destroyer. Then you pop over to the Magellan is your cruiser, right? Then your Korolev is more a heavy cruiser. Then your Geronimo is your carrier, your shuttle carrier, because it's got 2 secondary hulls, right? So you go single hull Hermes, double hull Magellan. Double nacelle Magellan, double nacelle with a secondary hull is Korolev. Two nacelles, 2 secondary hulls is your Geronimo. And those were kind of like, these are the ships that went to war, right? And then they came out with the Aries. And of course, the Aries is bigger, faster, stronger, whatever. So it had to be that. So you can see that it is really big. Even the nacelles are bigger than on the other classes of ships. That's the Aries, which then allows you to go to the Enterprise. And the Enterprise is your heavy cruiser. Yeah, it's bigger, right? It's definitely going to a size up. So that's kind of how we went through it. And these ships are modeled by Tobias, right? I'll get to the Aries in a second. But all those other ships, the other 4 classes of ships, Tobias Richter. And Tobias basically took the configurations we saw with JJ and TOSified them, right? And not he Axanarified them, because he used, he came up with a unique nacelle design. He came up with a secondary hull design. So it's really him taking the concepts and then porting them over. For the Klingons here, and we'll go through the Klingons, the D6 was his design. The rest, the Klingon, from the bird of prey, here was the early bird of prey, the Raptor, D4, D5. Those, I believe, are all cannon ships from Enterprise, more or less. But I could be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure the D4 is. Maybe he came up with the Raptor and the D5, and he may have come up with these ships for the early bird of prey. I haven't talked to Tobias in a little bit, so I have to get back with him. The D6 was his. That's what he came up with, because we needed a D6, right? If D7 was the analog for the Constitution, the D6 was there before the Aries, because D6 we bring out the Aries, they bring out the D7, we bring out the Constitution, right? I
really like the D6 design.
Yeah, I thought the D6 was great, right? It's beautiful. Tobias did an amazing job there. And guys, feel free to ask questions as we go along, because and Chris will interrupt me, and we can answer your questions. Okay. So here's another look I'll show you. Did I get it? I guess I didn't open it. Hold on a second. Yeah. This was okay. This I'll show it to you anyway, even though it's not directly related to the. But this is. I'm trying to think where this came from. This came from someone doing the gaming miniatures, which is amazing what you can do with 3D today. But here you have bird prey. Raptor. I'm sorry?
Charles Owens.
Is that what? I don't.
Yeah, it looks like Charles Owens doing stuff for Squadron Strike Axanar is my guess.
Okay. So there's that. Now let's go and the other ship that we brought that was only in for really for one reason, and that's because it's mentioned in the FASA game, and that's the Marklin class, right? So we need to address the Marklin class, because the Marklin class we know was okay, here it is. Let me just unzip it. And let's see, can I guess I can. All right, so here's the Marklin class. Okay. So yeah, and this really, I wanted the way that Marklin came about was I wanted a Marklin class, and I wanted to look like the fastest ship, which you only see the top view on that that little image on the cover of the 4 Years War. I think they have it in I think there's a 3 view of it in one of the maybe in the 4 Years War book. But anyway, we knew basically what it looked like. So I went on Sci-Fi Meshes, I think it was, and Al Denelt here was like, I'll build that for you. So he built it, and then Tobias took it and finished it. And we actually have there's actually a little video piece of it that we didn't use in Prelude, but just to show.
It looks like what you get when a battle star and a Federation starship love each other very much.
Yeah, and here, it's not an elegant design. Let's put it that way.
Right? Yeah, it looks like it's got head.
Yeah, and here's a good look. This is, I believe, one of Tobias's final images. But it works, and the whole purpose of having the Marklin was basically saying, hey, we know, according to FASA, that Garth was on the Xenophon. That was his first ship. It was a Marklin class. Let's build it, right? So we did that. Okay. So then we get to the Aries. And it may take a moment to download all the Aries images because I put a bunch of them. And the Aries, as there it is, as I've said many times. Let's see. Here it is. And here's the Aries. Okay, good. Enough of all this. I'm just going to pull up some images. So how did we come up with the Aries? All right, that is the question. There was a couple ships that I wanted to emulate because at this point, this is 2000. This is like 2011, 2012. I think I really got to it in 2012, and so one is the Centaur class. We all know what the Centaur class is. I don't need to show you what the Centaur looks like. But I love the Centaur. And back in the dark ages, when I was in high school and I was drawing starships, I always loved underslung nacelles. So there were a couple ships that really affected the design of the Aries. And one of them was this one by John Eves. And he did this one for the USS Mawson, was a chapter of Starfleet, the fan club. And I love this. I'm like, yeah, that's a badass ship. And so this was one of the first images I saved. There was I have a folder on my computer, and I saved, like, these are the images that I want, the Aries to be based on. And this was one of them. And I point out, when people say that, the USS Shenzhou is a total ripoff of the Aries, I say, well, look, the Shenzhou with John Eves, right? And I ripped off John Eves for the Aries. So it's not like he's ripping me off. He's ripping himself off. He's pulling a James Horner here, right? He's basically, the Shenzhou is basically James Horner ripping, the Battle of Mutara Nebula, that heavy beat when the Genesis device is about to go off, is a total direct ripoff of the aliens, of the piece from the aliens when they're on the platform trying to get off and then take off, right? I say it's beautiful, right? I love it when artists rip themselves off because they're not, it's you know, that's ironic. They're not ripping themselves off. They're taking their inspiration from their previous work. And that's what John Eaves did with the USS Shenzhou. He kind of said, hey, I like this. And I kind of did this before. He's done so many designs. He's the master, right? So here was one image that I used. Okay. Now here's another one. Is it, what's that?
If I can interrupt for a second. Okay, because we were talking about James Horner and musicians and stuff like that. So what is, the famous conductor, Basil Polidorus, right?
Yes.
What's his connection to Star Trek?
Oh, you told me.
Did I tell you this?
You told me, but go ahead. Tell everyone, because it's awesome.
He was in 3 episodes of the original series as an actor.
Which is amazing.
He started out as an actor, very quickly switched over to being a composer, but he started as an actor. And let's see, let me find it. He played Klingon, security officer, and trooper. He was a trooper in the episode. And what's the connection to Axanar with him? The connection is he played a trooper in the episode where John Gill plays the Nazi leader. And John Gill,
Patterns of Force.
Yes, and John Gill, of course, for anybody here who's not Alec and doesn't have this at the tip of his tongue, John Gill is the narrator of Prelude to Axanar. He does the intro stuff, and he's a famous Federation historian who later went over to the dark side.
Yeah. That's
very nice bit. That was a very nice bit, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, and it's I love it when people figure that out on like their 3rd or 4th viewing of Prelude. They're like, "Oh my God, I just realized John." So all right. So here's another image.
It took a while for me to figure it out, but when I first saw it, it's like, that name's really familiar. Why is that name familiar?
Okay, so here's another image. Now, what you'll notice about this, if you pay attention, is it's upside down. Yeah, but I found this online, and I said, that would be really cool if it was upside down. And so it's kind of got an NX-01 style saucer but I like, okay, well, here's another one. Again, underslung nacelles. I didn't know what the secondary hull was going to look like, if there was a secondary hull, but I'm like, here's another design. And so, which I really like. Now, the design that really, besides the John Eaves design, the design that is closest to the Aries, I like, this was the one I was like, this is what the Aries looks like, is this one, which again, online image by some fan, and it's this one, Revolution. And from this, if you basically go, oh, that's the Aries 100 years later, right? Look at that tiny little secondary hull. Look at the scoop of that, the shape of that, with the recessed deflector.
The buried deflector, very much like the Sovereign.
Yeah. So this was it. I was like, yep, this is it. This is what I want. The Aries. I wasn't crazy about the rear end because it ends so quickly. But I was like, we're really close here, right? We're really close here. And so what I did was, when I first contacted Sean Turnjo, is I gave him a list. I said, okay, here you go. This is what, and that Revolution, I said, the Revolution is your starting point. I said, so let's get a TOS saucer section, TOS nacelles, and sorry, cats. And and we went from there. Now, his first drawing was a little far from the mark. But let me. So here was his first drawing, and I said, okay, you know, you got the basic idea. Here's what it needs. And I said, look at the revolution. That's the way that the dish is. You know, I don't want that, you know, and I kind of went through it. And what I would do is with him taking that is I would, and I think I have some here. Yeah. He would draw something and I would send it back with corrections. And I would literally print it out, write on it, scan it, and send it back to him and said, okay, this is what it needs to look like. Boom. So here's another one. So he comes up with another drawing, and I'm like, okay.
Oh, getting there.
I said, yeah. I said, okay, get rid of the, you know, so you see this curve bugs me, very TOS, but would rather see it flat. So I basically told him to take that out. He's starting with a TNG primary hull, and I'm like, it's got to be pre-TOS. And a lot of the, so we get to a basic
like
design.
You said at the top there, more TOS, because that looks like movie era.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And and then I'm, you know, you see I'm making notes all over the place. Ultimately, the nacelles were totally redesigned by Tobias. And you see how he's got these long extended for the impulse reactors. I'm like, cut this off. Yeah. And so here was, you know, so this was kind of the way we iterated the ship. And then we got a little closer, but here's some more, you know, and with that, I also said, with that one, I said the impulse engines were too long. I was like, okay, see here, like, you know, this is me sketching out saying, don't make the impulse engine so long. And then here's another one. Let's see. Is this? No, that was the same. Here's another. Okay, so here's another one. He's doing. So I was like, you know, he had these extensions around which didn't make a lot of sense. So I told him to cut it off. He's at this point, he still has this really extended rear section. And so I'm trying to get to something that's pre-TOS. And I'll tell you, this is,
do you know?
What's that?
How old the guy is he?
I don't know. I'm sure he's probably around, at this point, Sean's probably around 50. He's a good 10 years younger than me. What I found with him was, like, John Eves did some concept sketches for us and I got to dig him out, like Klingon. I think it was Klingon weapons. He did a few. And with John, what I found was he was just too advanced. Like, John's drawing was dictating that this was a Klingon disruptor from, you know, Voyager era, right? It was like he was going forward, not back, and that's, listen. There's a lot of that is just personal preference. Also, remember, John had just been working for Star Trek 2009, right?
Yeah,
and at this point he probably also did Into Darkness. I think he had done the Into Darkness stuff. So he's used to JJ, right? And JJ's and that environment, which was pre-TOS, but not in his universe. Pre-TOS looked post-TOS, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's
the
it's
thing
a
I
different
found with
design.
Sean. Yeah, the thing with Sean was he was doing the same exact thing. Sean was trying to replicate the Titan, just with the nacelles in a different area and round nacelles. And so I was constantly correcting him, saying, no, it needs to be like this. And ultimately and the ultimate design that went to Tobias. Let me see if I have
The reason why I asked how old he was is that it sort of profiled like he was somebody who grew up on TMP and later, and
Yeah.
as a as a result didn't think in terms of the visual design language of the earlier show.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so
he draws with an accent.
Yeah, yeah. That's pretty much it. And here's and again another later image. Still not what I wanted. I also thought the nacelles were a little big compared to the saucer, and
it's getting there though.
Yeah, it was. Yes, it took a lot. And really, what happened was, and I'm trying to think of what was the last version that he did, and I think yeah, because these you could see another one. Okay, this is an early one. Oh, that's post. Oh, here we go. All right, here's another one, and again, he's channeling the Titan with his sloping deck in the back for the shuttlecraft, and so at some point I was like, okay, close enough. Let me give it to Tobias, and I'll work with Tobias. So it went from his drafting table, and really, this is it. It's like, forgive me, I'm offended when Sean says he designed the Aries, because he didn't. I designed the Aries, and Tobias designed the Aries, and he did. I think he mostly drafted, but that's fine. I've said for years that the three of us designed it together, and the final look is what that you have now is really Tobias Richter. He's the one. We did the nacelles. He did. He everything.
Secondary hull's a lot bigger in Tobias's version.
I'm sorry.
The secondary hull's a lot bigger in Tobias's version.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah. So he really took it and just Tobias took it and made it the ship that it is today. Here's and here is some of the early. Whoops. Here's some of the early works of Tobias. Right. So now you see, oh yeah, that's getting close to the Aries we know and love. Right. It's not exactly there, but this was him taking, once he took the basic, the basic art that Sean had, he started iterating on it, and he and I started, working on it together, and we'd go through the nacelles. What did we want on the nacelles? And I don't have I didn't download as many of his. Oh wow, that's a weird design. Cargo shuttle. I don't even remember the last time I was here. I'm going to share this with everyone. Everyone get a kick out of this. I'm like, wow, where did this come from? Yeah, he never finished this one, but it's a great design, interesting design.
Yeah, I like it.
And so, yeah, here were basically some of the, once Tobias started animating it, we started getting great still images of the Aries, and this is pretty much the Aries you know and love. The dish isn't lit up at this point, but so that's kind of okay. So so there you go. There's kind of the Aries. So I'm going to go back and pop up the other the image of the fleet, so we can talk. so we can talk about the fleet, and if you want me to find specific images, but there we go. So
yeah, that's a nice image.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Wakeless Rex. We appreciate it. I think so too. Someone did the 10 best Star Trek ships of all time. It's the 10 best Starfleet ships of all time, and the Aries was one of them. And I took a lot of pleasure in that. Yeah, and listen, the big thing before we get into the details of the different ships and we start talking about the different ships is, it's like in Star Trek. The Enterprise in Star Trek is a character.
Yep.
And it's got, it's got a personality, and it's got a character, and that's the way I viewed the Aries. Is the Aries? We wanted the Aries to be, to be a character in that you identified with, and so in the full script, which you'll eventually read, in the Battle of the Gas Giant, she gets the shit kicked out of it, and she gets back. They get her back to Starbase 1 for repairs, and another callback to the wonderful movie Midway. They get the Aries back, and Admiral Threll is,
and they do 30 days of repairs in 3 days.
Yeah, the engineer's like, we need like 2 weeks, and Admiral Threll's like, well, you got 2 days, and there's a whole bunch of great stuff in the script around the Aries and around Layoff, and really these are the things that we thought were important, because it really identifies the engineer, his relationship to the ship, his relationship to the captain, but it's that whole scene where you're going out in 4 days. You're like, what? But so there you go. So what question? So I've done my bit. You take it away, Chris, and let's chat.
Okay. So I don't see any questions to do. So let me add this on. So I'm going to buzz through the non-Prelude ships really fast, but they were just to sort of talk a little bit about how the design works. So everybody's seen this slide 1,000 times. So I'll just go on to the next one. They've seen this one a bunch too. This one is a refit that has an intermix shaft. The big question from the original series, there's a couple. One is, where is main engineering? And the other one is, did it have an intermix shaft, or did it have all the matter, antimatter stuff taking place in the engines themselves? And different people think different things. I was firmly in the Franz Joseph, it's all in the engine camp. I have been converted over to I like the idea that the secondary hull is part of the engineering plant in that way, and that it's this one great big complicated machine to make it all work. And this is one version of that, with the intermix shaft along the top going to the pylons, to the nacelles. Here's another version. You can't very well see it, but I left this version in so that if you want to read this stuff, you can freeze frame it when you watch the episode again. Here's the expanded version. It's got a smaller engine room and a smaller warp reactor down at the bottom of the pylons to the nacelles. You can't make it out very well in this image, but it's the same sort of idea in that it's generating the matter-antimatter reaction in the secondary hull and then pumping plasma up until the engines. So those are and here's, of course, the classic Doug Drexler. I think Drexler did both of it. The bottom one might be Probert. I can't remember if that's Probert or Drexler. The top one is Drexler, though. So you've got the refit Enterprise and sort of how the secondary hull changed to massively increase the hangar space. Okay, so let's talk about Prelude to Axanar. We actually have an authoritative source here. Will he rise to the challenge and answer some of the questions that we might have about vital engineering details, et cetera, et cetera. And I think arguably with these designs, the single biggest design question I have is, how does that engineering plant work? Does it have an intermix shaft? Because I think if the answer is it does have something like that, some of these designs, I don't understand how they work. And so we'll get into that. And there's a few places where I go, there should be people there. How do the people get there? And I don't understand how they get there. Okay. So here we have the Aries. I love the large hangar bay, at least relative to the rest of the size of the hull. Those red marks are where I think warp plasma and intermix shafts are. And, you know, it looks to me like it would fit, although depending upon how big that hangar bay is, there may be a little bit of interference there. And I also think, at least in later shows, there's a reason to think that you have to pump warp plasma to the deflector dish too, that the deflector dish is a very, very power hungry device. It creates subspace fields. I mean, that we know that from next gen. So it's basically a warp device itself. And so it needs a lot of warp plasma to power it. And so you need to make sure you've got a good line on that. And I think this ship actually does that. Okay, the Magellan, it's a wonderful callback to the Miranda class, but I don't see where the intermix shaft is. Now, note, that's a problem with the Miranda class too.
Right.
If there is an intermix shaft, it's probably horizontal going between the two engines or something like that. And now you've got warp plasma, if not antimatter, in the people tank. I don't like having warp plasma anywhere near the people tank if I can avoid it. And it looks like it's got a teeny tiny hangar bay underneath that torpedo launcher. And so it makes me wonder, like, if you're pumping antimatter up to power the torpedoes, it makes me wonder how it routes around the hangar bay. But, you know, maybe I guess if your ships in the hangar bay need to use antimatter also, you're probably fueling and defueling them as you're doing flight ops from the hangar bay. So having it near a conduit like that's probably a feature, not a bug, right?
Yeah, you know, I think you hit on the head. This gets back to how is the Miranda? And there were Miranda class blueprints. How did the people that did the Miranda class blueprints identify all the challenges? You know, and so I haven't given a lot of thought to it. However, I mean, could you live in a Starfleet where some ships mixed mixed it in the engine and some had an intermix chamber? It seems right. You know, either you have your engine room in the back of the saucer section, and basically you've got, you know, cut off 25% or 30% of your saucer in the rear of it, and go, okay, this is all engineering back here, right?
Yeah.
You know, and this is where you get to that whole Geronimo primary hull that's kind of cut out, because basically what you're saying is that like something like this. Well, it's probably a lot easier to envision where the intermix chamber is in this design, because you're basically saying, look, everything in the back half of the saucer is engineering. Here, you don't have a back half of the saucer. You have whatever you have there, though. That it's I hate to call that a secondary hull. The thing that's connecting the two nacelles and the two secondary hulls. It's quite possible that the intermix chamber is in there somewhere. And I've asked.
It'd almost have to be if it exists. But then it begs the question of, what are the secondary hulls for other than hangar bays and the deflector and like, yeah. So on the one hand, I love this design. Two secondary hulls, love it. On the other hand, I hate this design. And I do think that this is a pretty good indication that drugs are legal in the Federation. So, but this is a very interesting design, and also you've got that torpedo room that's on that bridge between the two engines. How does crew get to the torpedo room? Right? We know from maybe they went with an all automated torpedo room, but oh my God, that sounds like a technologically risky proposition. That little circle there, there appears to be some sort of port there. And so I know that from Star Trek Enterprise in NX-01, we never saw any of this, but the designer, who I think was Drexler, but it might have been Probert, but it might have been Drexler, his conceptualization involved there were parts of the ship that you could only get to by a work pod, because you didn't want to be in that part of the ship anyway. And so when you had to stop every now and then and do maintenance, you get in a work pod and you go to that part of the ship. And so, okay, I could maybe see that going on with the Geronimo. But this is, I think, the craziest design in Prelude to Axanar. It's the one that I most look at and sort of squint really hard and go, huh, interesting.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I know, absolutely. I mean, if it is in fact a shuttle carrier, if that's the idea,
yeah,
then not having engineering in the secondary hulls makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much stuff you could carry in that.
Yeah,
that secondary hull.
Absolutely. And there's enough of a, you know, I don't even know what you call it. It's part of it's not part of the saucer section, but it's kind of part of the primary hull up top there. That's in the, in between the all four pylons, right? It's the two pylons and then the two pylons on the that extend from the saucer section, the half saucer section, up to the nacelles. But that area in the middle there has got to be engineering, because I don't know what else it is, right?
Yeah, it's got to be.
It's got to be engineering, and that means that, and also, let's face it, this is made for, it's not just a shuttle carrier. It's think of all the jobs that a shuttle carrier can do. Well, they can evacuate planets. They can be part of a task force of you start taking the shuttles and start doing different things with them, right? Like we do in Axanar. There's ones that are missile launchers. They're they're photon torpedo launchers. They might have a single photon torpedo that they're carrying, or they are little mini AWACS ships, or whatever the case may be.
Or it might have been a colony transport or something like that. I mean, because you could easily, if you got these big empty secondary hulls, right, you gotta leave some space for shuttles to come on board, but you could easily fill the rest of that with containerized living quarters.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it seems to me that this is the ship where modularization is really going to come to the fore, and by that time they figure out modularization, unlike the U.S. Navy, and they figured out. I mean, you could just see them popping different sections in there. It might be just living quarters, but all right, you got to go, evacuate this planet. Well, boy, a ship this size, maybe with this, they could carry 10,000 people.
Yep.
You're going to be cramped, but they could do it. It's an evacuation. You're not on a cruise ship, honey. So that's possible. But I think this is the one that has the most, as strange as it may be, it also has the most potential to do what you need it to do for engineering.
I think you're right. So, okay, Korolev. Korolev is interesting because it's got some of the same problems of the Geronimo, in that I sort of wonder, like, how if if you're mixing antimatter in the secondary hull, how does it get to the nacelles? And the answer is it has to take this sort of weird stuff to get there.
Yeah, it's a weird route, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's an interesting design. And it also has, it's got a little bit less of the problem of getting to the for the crew getting to the torpedo room, because at the very least they don't have to go through an engine to get there.
Right.
But it does look like it's not the most pleasant journey to. I foresee them crawling up a ladder to get an.
Oh yeah, there's a Jeffries tube.
Yeah. It's been, if you have to commute through a Jeffries tube, you probably are looking for another job.
Yeah. I also think these things have to be self-contained, right? And that they're storing their torpedoes, in that hole in the wing, and that's the launcher in the middle, and they're just auto loading into them in.
Yeah, and one of the things that's always problematic when talking about Star Trek, not only do you have different artists, different writers, et cetera, sort of making it up as they go along, you also have the issue that we're talking about everything from Star Trek Enterprise all the way through to Voyager and post-Voyager. And when you add all that up, you're talking, a good 300 years of design. And I challenge you to come up with a consistent design theme between, say, the U.S. Navy of today and the U.S. Navy of 1700. Oh, wait a minute. There wasn't even a U.S. Navy of 1700. So, yeah. So there's potentially been a lot of change, and I can see a lot of things changing over time. So let's see. The next one is the Hermes. Which has a very Franz Joseph look to it, with the exception of those torpedoes on the top. Oh, another thought on all the ships with the torpedoes on the top like that. One thing that's occurred to me is that they were a late refit. That the ship was designed that way, and at some point they said, "All right, we got to add torpedoes to this thing," and I don't have a better idea on how to do it. Because we need to be able to route we need to be able to route actual antimatter to these things, and so this is the easiest way to do that, and so we're going to do it that way. And so maybe if maybe if we had the designer, the Starfleet engineer, the Starfleet architect who designed it here, and we said, "What were you thinking?" He'd be saying, "I totally agree with you. It's a problem. It's a problem."
Yes.
But it looks like a Franz Joseph design destroyer now. At some point on the show, I am going to go through, and I intend to do a show on destroyers and a show on cruisers and a show on frigates, et cetera, because there's some interesting stories there. And I think it highlights some of the themes that I try to talk about in the show, but I just haven't gotten around to doing that yet, because that's one of those things where I'm going to have a pretty good idea of what the entire path. Basically, I'm going to have to plot out about 8 episodes at the same time, and I'm challenged in doing 2 at the same time.
Well, here's something.
Yeah.
How do you manage the engine room and the warp, the intermix chamber and the warp plasma flow in the Discovery in the 32nd century, or wherever the hell they are now? With your standoff nacelles?
I have no idea.
Right, exactly.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah. I bounced off a Discovery at the end of season 2, I think it was, or when they had.
I made it halfway through 3.
Yeah,
I made it through 3. I made it through 3 and lost them in 4.
I got to the big battle that had all the fighters and the blast door. The blast door was the thing that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And so I should emphasize, because I haven't said this lately, if you like Discovery, hey, more power to you, right? There's
Yeah.
no reason why you should not watch something that you like watching just because I say that I don't like it, right? I like everybody to be educated consumers of these things, but my Jeopardy category is how navies work. And so, I can talk about, I always say my fandom superpowers, I can talk about real world navies and science fiction navies at the same time. But when it comes to Star Trek, if that's your cup of tea, by all means watch it and just ignore me. It's not my cup of tea, so I don't watch it.
Yeah.
There we go. So let's see. Olive asked, is there any possible advantage to handling antimatter things by hand? No. I think the answer is no.
No.
Yeah, I think the answer is no.
So, and here you say no intermix shaft. Again, if there is an intermix shaft, you're taking up the rear third of that saucer section as engineering, right? So there could be. I mean, it's got a bulge there in the back, so it could have a shaft, and it could be that. But
could be in the cell. I mean, not the nacelle, the pylon. Could be
pylon.
The pylon.
Absolutely.
We haven't seen that yet. And, the other thing is with all these ships, just as a general overall statement, we don't know whether Starfleet considers these designs to be successful or not.
Yeah.
We know that in a time of war, they had these ships and they threw them into the fray. We don't know anything about their design histories. We don't know whether we said, oh my God, we're going to have to send this ship in. It was a mistake ever building it. Or they said, thank God we have this ship that we can send in.
Right.
We just simply don't know. The fact that they decided to build a new ship in the form of the Aries and then later the Constitution class sort of tells you that maybe the ships that they had weren't fully capable of getting the job done, but maybe maybe this was the best Explorer they ever had.
Yeah, and and in my mind, basically, all the Franz Joseph ships took the place of all of these ships, right?
Yeah, that works for me. Let's see, and I think that's the last ship that I have. And I know that you said that you had to roll out at 11 because you have a 7:30 appointment that you have.
We have an early morning. Yeah, we have an early morning meeting to talk about the rest of. But and just to once again, judging by everyone who's, I'm reading the comments and judging everyone over there knows what's going on with Axanar. But I was going through some of the comments today on YouTube, and it's like, well, when's this coming out? And I'm like, you're commenting on a podcast where we talk about when this is coming out. So clearly you did not listen to the podcast. You just, but anyway, just, once again, we're hoping to bring it out this summer. Our last shoot is this month, which I'm very excited about. And then it's all in the can. I got a meeting with one VFX team, hopefully tomorrow, another VFX team this week. We just got some amazing guys orchestrating the music. So things are going. I mean, things they're coming to an end, and we're really excited about that. This is a busy year. A lot's happening, and I'll have a lot more information after tomorrow as well. But yeah, we're keeping my fingers crossed.
I'm looking forward. So before I met Alec, before I got a chance to contribute to this, I was a guy who supported the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And so I'm waiting with bated breath, just like everybody else is. But I want to see it done right. And, having supported a lot of Kickstarters that ended up failing in the end, I look at this and I go, most Kickstarters that had these many roadblocks thrown in the way would have collapsed a long time ago. And so I'm pretty impressed that despite the fact that the road hasn't exactly been smooth, that it's still going to happen. So looking forward to it. One last question here from Hermano.
I was looking at that question.
Yeah, is the presumption that intermix shafts have to be vertical? I don't have that presumption.
I don't either.
I think a lot of this comes now. If you talk to Andy Presby, Andy will point out that there are reasons involving real world physics why, if you're going to tap plasma off of something, you want to do it when the plasma makes a 90-degree turn. And so that the geometry actually matters. And he also can tell you that horizontal intermix shaft on the Motion Picture Enterprise is almost exactly the right length, that if you've got a matter-antimatter reaction taking place at the vertical component that shaft, the vertical shaft, before it goes along the horizontal side, it gives just enough time for this one particular real-world particle to decay, so you don't have it contaminating your warp plasma when it gets to the engine. And he doesn't know whether that should make any difference, but Andy, the physics major with a degree in spacecraft design, who's been thinking about this since he was literally 6 years old, says, hey, that's cool. I'm going to put it in my canon. And so therefore it's in my canon as well. If it's in his canon, it's in my canon. That having been said, what does vertical mean in space? I think a lot of this boils down to they've got the geometry of fitting big components in a hull that have to have certain minimum sizes and, have to be feeding stuff in particular directions. And so verticals, whatever direction your gravity field tells you it is, there's no reason why you couldn't have people on the Enterprise oriented in lots of different directions, depending upon what the gravity field is on that particular deck. So I don't think that that's part of it at all. In fact, I have no reason to think that there is any vertical in or horizontal in those shafts. I have no reason to think that the gravity field of the ship actually affects those shafts. They're probably neutral, right? They're probably in 0G, just because it'd make things easier. So I don't think that that's the case. I do think, going back to that, we're talking about designs that take place over 300 years. I do think that the technology changes over time. And I think that things that were state of the art at one point are considered dangerously obsolete 50 years later, right? And so, what the right answer is at such and such a time doesn't mean that it's still the right answer at another time. And it's just a TV show, everybody. So they're making shit up as they go along. So.
That's true. Yep. Yeah, that's true.
Olive points out that decay is about time, not distance. Yes, that is true. It is about decay, is about time, not distance. But the time necessary to travel that distance is where that number comes from.
Right.
And to be honest, I mean, there's clearly some assumptions about the speed of things moving, et cetera, et cetera. I don't remember why Andy picked those particular numbers to fit in there, but he thought it was something particular. And the thing is, Sternbach is just famous for, like, Andy says that he can tell what Sternbach was reading at the time based upon stuff that shows up. Right? Like, he can point to a particular article that talked about matter-antimatter reactions inside, like, crystalline structures or something like that. And he thinks that came out like right before Star Trek: The Next Generation came out. And he thinks that Rick Sternbach was reading that. I've never asked Rick that question. I haven't exchanged emails with Rick in a long time. But it's... Sternbach has got he's got his act together in that stuff, and he did a lot of serious research.
Yes,
A
he did.
lot of serious research. So I've got nothing but total respect for the guy. So.
Yep, me too.
All right. So speaking of respect, I respect the fact that you gave me another 11 minutes beyond what you said you were willing to give me.
I worked out before, I was working out around 8 o'clock and finished my bike riding and jumped in the shower, and cats are fed, the dogs are walked, and I'm jumping right in bed.
Yeah, I'm thinking I need to do that too, because I've got a bunch of work to do tomorrow. So
Thank you, Weightless Rex. I appreciate that comment.
Yes, I do too. And with that in mind, I think it's time to say goodnight, and I'll go ahead and play the outro. So live long and prosper, everybody.
Live long and prosper.